everyone. This week's video is about my 400-gallon reef because it just had its 5th year anniversary as of the release of this video. So I want to start it off with no filter on the camera whatsoever, so this is kind of what the camera can pick up with a raw lens, but I'd much rather give you a top to bottom description of the entire setup with the filter installed so you can really appreciate the beauty of the corals and fish. This tank is 84 inches long, 7 feet, it's 3 feet wide, and it's 30 inches tall. This was the last custom-made tank from Marineland. They'll never make one again after mine. Mine was the last. The tank is sitting on a steel stand that has an incorporated walkboard that's actually installed in the back of the tank right now, and it slides into the front when I want to work on the full length of my aquarium. Above it, I'm going to show you the lights. Okay, so a funny thing about this tank, when I first set up my 400-gallon was in 2011, and after 13 months the tank sprung a leak, and they had to repair it, and it took them 18 months to replace it with this tank. And so my woodwork didn't get done because, well, there was no tank. So I told myself, I'm going to do woodwork, it's going to look amazing, I've got this big plan. Here we are 5 years in on tank number 2, and I have a piece of foam up here. So I'm going to remove the foam to show you the lighting. Eventually, maybe by the 10th anniversary, I'll have some woodwork on this tank. So here we go. So this is just foam core board. It costs very little, maybe 10, 20 bucks. I got it from my acrylic supplier. These are my lights, and these are metal halide bulbs with LED supplements that are called Reef Bright XHOs. So I've got a strip in the front and a strip in the back, and they replaced the VHO lighting that I used to use on my tank. I loved my VHOs, and I finally could not buy them. It was just impossible to find them, and I had to finally give in to some LEDs. And to be honest, I sat on them for about 6 months before I even installed them on the tank. I never rush into any new equipment. I take my time. But I adore them. They're fantastic. And when these metal halides turn off and just those blue LEDs are going, my tank glows and pops with color, and it makes me super happy. The reason I put the foam on the front of the tank is only to block this light from hitting me in the eyes. And that way I can enjoy my living room and not be blinded by lights from above. Now this light system is on a rolling rack that I can push back and move forward when I need to work on the tank. And it's using 400-watt metal halides that are called twin arcs. And a twin arc bulb is a bulb that has 2 arcs inside of it, and one is 10,000 Kelvin and one is 20,000 Kelvin. You probably noticed this object up here. That's the Eheim auto feeder. This drops food in my tank twice a day. And I fill it up with this stuff right here. This is a food that no longer is available from Instant Ocean, and I hoard it as much as I can get my hands on this stuff. And when it comes in the tank, it goes into something I created called an auto feeder chimney. So I'm going to hit this button and get Spock all excited. So you can see the drum is spinning, and then some flake food is going to pour into this little square. Spock's going to notice it. She's going to start eating it, and then the other fish are going to jump in there in a moment too, because they want some as well. See, here they come. They all love this food. And this has been really nice during the daytime when I'm working, or if I'm not even in town, this is automatically feeding the tank. And every night I feed my reef with frozen food that I thaw out before lights out. So this is my giant reef, and you'll notice it's open top. I don't have any screens on top, which a lot of people like screens to keep their fish inside. Well, I have this theory that if your reef is low in the tank, they're less prone to jump out. But when you have things coming all the way to the surface, the fish are more likely to think they need to dart out of the tank. So far, I've done really well with not having fish jump out. I prefer not having to deal with taking screens off the tank and putting screens back on the tank and worrying about the little sliver where a fish found a way to jump between and escape and die. Instead, my stuff just stays in the tank where it belongs. And this is my favorite view. I look down at my reef all the time. I keep telling you guys to do it. I have a little floater box right here that I use, and I put it right on the surface, and then I can just enjoy the view of my entire tank and see what's going on and see what's fallen down, or just watch how the corals are growing and see the changes. This right here is the external overflow box on my reef tank. Most tanks have a box built in, or they add a box one way or another, and when I designed this tank, I said I wanted the external box where nothing's in my way. My entire box has no interruptions inside the aquarium itself. Here is where my plumbing is. And this section right here is a lid that hides my 4 Durso drains that go down. So I just have a piece of polycarbonate that sits on top. I'm going to move that auto feeder out of the way temporarily. And there is the inside drains. So there's 4 drains going down. 3 of them are going down to the skimmer section, and the very front one is going down to the refugium. So that's 75% of my water drains to the skimmer, 25% to the refugium. The reason I have a lid is primarily to keep algae from growing in here. So that way nothing grows in there that doesn't belong, and I just have water flowing down through the drains straight down to the sump. Follow me into the fish room. This section here was actually a part of my garage at one time, and I poured concrete and I built walls around it, and I made myself a nice large area for all the filtration. And this is the back side of my reef, which is pretty much as beautiful as the front side of my reef. And I really appreciate coming back here and looking at it. And honestly, if I had taken all my rock and moved it to the back of the tank, it would have looked a lot bigger from the front. But because I'm running it more like a peninsula tank, where I can see it from this side, I can see it from that side, all the rock work had to be in the middle of the aquarium, and that way there's space on each side between the rock and the glass. And so it kind of makes the tank seem smaller when you're standing in front of it, versus, I've had people often say, well, how big is this tank? Because they're expecting it to be massive, and they don't see the 3-foot front to depth except when they're looking at it from the end of the tank, from the kitchen side. So I have a walkboard right here, and this walkboard can support human weight. I've had 2 people on here at once. I've had bags of salt on here, bags of sand on here with me, and I've had no issues whatsoever. I use a step ladder to get up there. And when I was filming earlier, you saw my face above the tank. I was kneeling on my walkboard. The only thing that would make this walkboard better is if I could raise the ceiling up higher so I could stand straight up. But this right here is just a temporary shield to kind of block the light from hitting the lens. Normally this is a big open area. I'll go ahead and lift this up. So you see I have full access to work on my tank. I love having this height with nothing in my way. Let me get the walkboard out of the way. I've already retracted most of it. So it slides out of its metal posts. Then I'll carefully put it somewhere where it will not destroy my aquarium. Let's chase the plumbing down to the sump and kind of show you how it all works. So I've got the 4 Dursos in here that run to 4 different drains, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now on the front side, 1 goes straight down to the refugium, right there. The others are going straight down into the sump. So you can see the 3 lines. It starts off as 1.5 inch plumbing, and then reduces down to 1 inch plumbing, and then goes into a bubble tower. The bubble tower itself is used to trap all the bubbles inside the sump, inside a compartment right there, and have no bubbles at all in the skimmer section, which is back here. So you can see, besides all the detritus I haven't cleaned out, my water is bubble free. And here's my Nios skimmer with my Avast skimmer swabby. I cleaned it a week ago, and you can tell that everyone has been doing their business inside the system. So the skimmer is running 24 hours a day. It's only temporary shut off when I'm feeding the tank. And the extra waste goes out this tube and into a waste collector right here. The next part of my filtration is just granulated activated carbon that's inside a Reef reactor. And then I have my calcium reactor that I've been running for about 14 years. That's the Life Reef. And it's been using up a lot of media lately to keep up with my tank's demands. And then I recently added this pump, which is the Camor pump. And this pump is what's feeding water through tubing. It's drawing water in here and pushing the water out into my reactor up there. And then it comes out and drips into the sump. And this is continuously dosing 24 hours a day. And then all this other stuff that you see is just distractions to make you impressed with me. We've got a manifold here that I'm barely using. I have 1 valve that's feeding the carbon reactor. The other ones are not even in use. I have 1 dosing pump here that is to dose magnesium back there. And then all this extra plumbing here is the plumbing that's used for the anemone cube that goes through the wall and flows into the sump, into the same bubble tower as the reef. And that's pretty much it. I have a top-off container right there that's full of water. That holds about a week's supply of water to top off the aquarium, maybe longer, maybe up to 10 days. And then down here, I have the Abyss 200 pump, and this is the return pump that I've been using in my reef now for about a year, and it's running at 75%. I also have a couple of heaters down here. These are the Eheim Jaeger heaters, and there's 3 in my system. There's 2 there, and there is 1 right there, which you can almost see. No? Right there. One thing I want to point out inside the sump is this black sheet of foam. I'm always recommending this foam to people. It's dirt cheap, you can buy it at a hobby shop, and it's creating a big shadow so that all the light from the refugium does not shine on all my gear, so that way everything stays algae free. Right here is the float switch and float valves from the ATK for my top off. The module is right there. And then I've got back in here 1 cooling fan that's actually spinning right now. It's a 120 millimeter fan. So my tank is over 79 degrees and the fan is helping cool by blowing down on the surface of the water. And that is pretty much all my filtration. So let's go look at the controller and the electronics. So I'm still using the Apex Classic. I've got a couple of MP60s. Here are the MP60s right here and back there. I've got battery backups for everything, so that way when the power goes out, those pumps keep running. And then I've got a bunch of switches right here to manually turn things on and off. Like if I want to clean the collection cup on the skimmer, I can just push that button and stop the skimmer and go ahead and remove the collection cup. When I'm done, turn it right back on. Down here is my CO2 tank. I have a UPS down here for the Apex. There's a bunch of these power bricks that are used for the Vortex. Here's my controller showing the tank right now. And this right here is the module, the WXM module that communicates with the Ecotech gear. So here you can see the display on the Abyss showing the power it's using, the wattage it's using, as well as the temperature of the pump itself. And then over here to the right is my pH controller that I use for the CO2 level inside my calcium reactor. And on the left is the display screen for my Apex that gives me information such as pH and temperature at a glance. In the corner of my fish room, I have a frag tank system that I built myself. That's a 60-gallon tank along with a sump underneath with a skimmer and a refugium right here, a M1 return pump. I have more gear over here on the left that is all mounted on the wall to keep it dry. I'm running a couple of Radion light fixtures on the top. And it is just an area where I can test things out if someone were to ask me to try something out. I got some room above. So that kind of gives you an idea of what's going on over there. There's also a top-off container on the far right, and then way over here on the left is my triple dosers. The anemone cube has 12 clownfish and a hippo tang, and probably about 32, 33 anemones currently. But here is the view of my reef from the far end of the tank. And this is the view I use every single day to enjoy my aquarium. And one of the best parts, of course, is just being able to see the distance, you know, having the low things in the front and then as the reef scape goes upward in the background, and having the back completely clean instead of covered in coralline. That's really important for this effect. I wish I didn't have to have my return nozzles right there. If there was nothing, that would be even better. This entire tank is made with Starfire glass. It's 3/4 inch on all 4 sides. The back wall, the far end from this point of view, is black acrylic that's on top of the glass, and that was designed so that way you wouldn't see the external overflow. The sand bed itself is 4 inches of Tropic Eden reef flakes, and that sand I've been using now for 8 years, 7 years, and 7 or 8 years, whatever you want to call it. You know, I set up the tank in 2011, and then I reset it in 2013. I had to wash all the sand and restart it again. And for the most part, it stays nice and clean, and it doesn't blow around from the flow in the tank. This pump right here is an MP40. And then this coral right here in the very front, this big gorgonian, a lot of people ask me about that. That came from Joe's 20,000 gallon reef. It's called the Tracy Morgan gorgonian. And then behind it, you can see a big green hammer coral. And then behind that is the sea bay anemone. And behind that is the shadowcaster acro. And behind that is Drew's acro. And then you just keep going. There's more and more SPS in the very back. The anemone cube's lighting had already dimmed down quite a bit because of the lunar mode. Currently, we're experiencing a new moon, which makes the light turn off a little bit earlier. So while I was filming the reef, everything was great. When I came around the corner, this tank was pretty dark. Now, technically, the anemone cube is 5 years old today as well, because both tanks were set up at the exact same time, both plumbed in at the same time. That one does all the growing. This one just kind of keeps doing the same thing every single day. So in a way, it's an easy tank for me because all the filtration takes care of it, and all I have to do is just kind of keep an eye on it, clean the glass, feed the fish, and enjoy all the tentacles swaying in the flow. This tank is being lit with a Radeon Gen 4 Pro that I installed earlier this year. Before that, it was a Radeon Gen 2. So these are bubble tips, all under LED lighting, but there's also Montipora down here, there's a Fungia down here, there's a Recordia here, there's a bubble coral on the other side. They're all doing well, and they're all down at the sand bed where the par is actually quite low. So right here, you can't really see it, but that's my acrylic cage that I made for the Vortec MP40. And I've had that cage now in my tank for probably 6 or 7 months. And all I do is about every 3 weeks, I take it off, I stick it in the sink, and I clean it with a toothbrush, and I put it right back in. And the coralline algae that is masking it doesn't even die, which is awesome, because I'm using tap water. I just do it really quick, just kind of get it clean and put it right back into place. And it keeps all the anemones from getting killed. And when I feed the tank, I feed it from this side, and I just put the food right here, and all the clowns come up. And actually, this is the time of day when I feed everything. So let me get some frozen food, and we'll film that. So it's time to feed the babies. As you can see, they're all ready. Look, they're all lined up over here. These fish over here are thinking the same thing. I'm going to push my yellow button. This is tied into my apex. And what that does is it turns off the return pump, and it turns off that Vortec. So now the flow is slowing down. These tentacles are going to barely move, and I can feed all my fish. So we'll give all the clowns and the hippo tang something to eat. And then I'm going to feed the main reef as well. So here we go. I just pour in a nice cloud of food. And Spock gets the biggest stuff first. And if there's anything left in my bowl that's large, I hold it in my fingers and give it to Spock. Here you go. Yeah, that's it. So everyone's getting something to eat. And then the last of the crumbs goes back in the anemone cube. And that's it for tonight. And then 10 minutes later, it's bedtime. So while everything is eating, I'll go ahead and talk to you about other parts of the reef tank. Let's do a fish list. So we've got a total of 28 fish in the reef. There's a Nassau tang, which is named Spock right there. I've got 2 yellow tangs, a purple tang, a coal tang, 3 anthias, a yellow chorus wrasse, 11 skunks that have been with me 3.5 years because they're harem fish, and so they live together. I've got a mandarin, a blue one. I haven't seen him in a few days, but usually he's in the rockwork. The copper band, butterfly fish, and a Pseudochromis fridmani, who's very elusive, but I usually only see at night when I'm in the back of the tank. And the lighting schedule for this reef is basically metal halides is the main light. And those are each on a 6-hour schedule each day. And they cover an 8.5-hour period. I run staggered lighting, and I have a video about staggered lighting that you can watch. The XHOs are running for 11 hours a day, from 11:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night, and it's really just for looks. And then I run moonlighting for 1 hour, and then the tank is in total darkness to sleep. I do water tests every single Saturday to check on how the tank is doing, and I check all the things you would think of, which would be salinity, alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, phosphate, nitrate. That's pretty much all my tests. And the averages are, salinity is always at 1.026. Alkalinity tends to be around 9.5 DKH. My calcium is always measuring at 400. Magnesium stays around 1350 parts per million. My average temperatures range from 77 at night to 79 each day. If the tank ever gets hot, it might get to 80, 80 and a half. My tank never gets hotter, and I don't need a chiller for it. I just have the cooling fan. I do have a vent fan built into the fish room that runs 24 hours a day to suck out heat from the ceiling as well as take out some of the humidity. And I do run a dehumidifier in my home to help protect the house from damage from all the moisture that comes from having a huge reef tank in your home. The 400-gallon reef, along with the 60-gallon anemone cube, plus the 60-gallon frag system, that's a lot of open water into my household. And I've seen things rust, and I did a video about wear and tear on your home. So I have to empty out the dehumidifier twice a day in the summer, and in the winter it seems to last. I could probably go 4 or 5 days without having to empty out the device. It lasts a pretty good long time. This reef has not had a water change in over a year, and it's not like I was intentionally trying to avoid water changes. I was counting on a product to remove the nitrate that didn't work, and I thought, if I'm doing water changes, how do I prove that the product works? Well, it didn't work for me, and in the meantime the tank continues to have nitrate. So it's measuring somewhere above 25 parts per million. It's probably around 30 or 40. I really don't worry about it much because everything seems healthy in the tank. But I'd like that number to be lower. However, the corals are indicating they don't care whatsoever, and they seem to grow. And I joke all the time that my reef lives in spite of me. I dose Prodibio every 15 days. And that's the Bioptim and Biodigest and Stronti Plus and IOD Plus. Those go in single vials. I just use one of the Pro vials of each of those 4 flavors and add that to my tank. And I'm not really dosing anything else. I recently I'm trying out something called Coral Essential Elements, but I've been really haphazard with it. I'm not doing it regularly, so I really can't say that it's doing anything for my tank at all. The one thing that I have not done that I probably will try as we head into the new year is to hook up AquaPower to a dosing pump and let that go into my system. But looking at what I'm seeing in my tank, I'm really not feeling like I need anything to make the corals grow better. They're all doing quite well. I'm at the point now where I need to actually do some fragging to protect corals from each other. I was overly ambitious with other things that I wanted to include in this video, but I really ran out of time. We're 23 minutes in. So I'm just going to save those things for a couple of other future videos, and that should be something enjoyable. And I am just really happy that the 5th anniversary is such a nice, momentous occasion with a super healthy reef. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'll give you links to different parts of my website that give you the information or the products I use. And of course, if you're not a subscriber to my channel, I highly recommend it because this channel is super duper educational. I'm always sharing information that will help you be successful and have a beautiful reef tank too. And this is a test for the 5th anniversary of my reef tank. By the time we're done, it'll be the 15th.